I'm so grateful that you could join us as we have this conversation about, are you spiritually curious about nature? We all have this heartfelt connection to the natural world, but for some of us, that connection goes so much deeper, and it helps to transport us into that realm of the divine where we can access guidance for our everyday life, big and small issues that are going on. And so we've gathered this beautiful group of like-hearted souls to share with you their profound experiences in nature and the impact that it's had on their lives. And it's our intention that this conversation, this high vibing conversation, is very sourcing to you and inspires you to go out and have your own experiences with the divine that comes through the natural realm. Each of us are so honored to have been the mouthpiece for the natural realm as it shares its stories through us. So I just want to have this casual conversation where we can go a little bit deeper and really bring the spiritual mainstream and see that when we shift ourselves from doing things to nature to being in collaboration with nature, that's when the magic really happens. Karen Shea, you included a story called A Tale of Two Trees. And of course, I'm already lit up because it's about trees. But can you tell us a little bit about your experience and how it impacted you?
Sure. Hi, so happy to be here. So I've always had a connection to trees, but I never really experienced them having a connection with me until, of course, one day I got yelled at by a tree. So here in the Pacific Northwest, we have these beautiful, magnificent trees that tower 150 plus feet into the sky. And my house happens to be surrounded by them. We also tend to get some pretty good notorious windstorms, which then make these big, magnificent trees a wee bit intimidating. And there happens to be one tree behind my house that follows the staircase to the second floor that can be seen through a window. And as time progressed, it looked like it was getting a little bit more compromised, at its base, because the roots were beginning to show, soil was beginning to shift. And so I made it a practice of mind to say a mantra every time I pass by this tree. And I mean, every time I pass by this tree, to say, please stand tall and strong and keep us safe. So who knew trees have a tolerance limit? And so I'm home alone one day, walking up the stairs, armful of laundry, passing the tree, saying this simple little mantra. And I hear so loud in my head, enough already. You've told me what my job is. I know what it is. Stop. And so it threw me off course so much that, of course, I fell going up the stairs. And then when I turned around, I'm looking at this tree and I'm cracking up thinking, oh my gosh, I just got yelled at by a tree. And then it was like, hey, wait a minute. You've been hearing me all these years. I mean, okay. And so what my friend, Cedar Friend, did to me was open up this whole new world of, yeah, we can talk to trees, but trees can talk back to us.
Izette, I would love if you would share with us the message that you also received from a tree. Now, your story about the tree initiation, it helped you release an ancient sorrow. And would you just tell us a little bit more about that?
I feel like Karen has already touched on so much of why I was excited to join this panel, um, that it really feels like I'm with kin here. And part of the ancient sorrow that I felt release on the first day that I had like this important encounter with this tree was this feeling of being like alone in the world, like dropped on this planet without sort of any guidance or any map. And even though I was surrounded by people that I loved and who loved me, I still had this feeling of just being so alone and feeling so far away from the spirit world. And I had looked at the spirit world as something that was just so much better than me. Um, and one day I woke up and I was guided to go to this park that I walked in really regularly, and I felt a connection to the park. But that morning I woke up and I stood in the middle of the park and I sort of sent out the question, "Who am I?" And I felt drawn to this tree that I had passed, thousands and thousands of times. And when I went up to the tree, I felt our heart fields join, and it felt like something melting inside of me. And I cultivated a really deep relationship with this tree for about a month. It felt like a devotional practice, or I would go to the tree and visit the tree as if it were kind of like an elder or a grandparent that I really revered. And the message that I unpacked in that time, and I honestly still continue to unpack, was kind of threefold. One was find your center, find like the very essence, the truth of your being. And then the second part was rejoin the web of life. Um, and that to me was sort of like really feel into the connections, like the lines of connections between me and other human beings and sort of like every other living thing. Um, and then the third part of that message, which was take your place at the table of creation, that was the part that I didn't quite understand.
Sherry, you wrote a beautifully moving story entitled Erica's Tree. And I would love you to tell us a little bit about who Erica is and how did this experience help you, and what are you hoping that sharing is going to do for other folks?
Well, Erica is a sweet soul who touched the earth for just 2 short years in human form. She's forever my granddaughter, even though now she resides in spirit. She was funny, sweet, smart, energetic, and loved the outdoors and to be outside most of all. And so that was really important to her. One of her first few words actually was outside. And she'd go to the front door and pull on it, even if it was January and the winds are blowing and the snow's flying. Didn't matter to her. She wanted to be outside because she so enjoyed being with the animals in our yard and with the nature and especially her tree. So once outside, good luck keeping up with her because as a little 2-year-old, why walk when you can run? So everywhere we ran, and grandma was in hot pursuit behind her, trying to keep up. She enjoyed being outside in her yard. Again, we had a 2-acre wooded lot. We have deer and turkeys, birds, wild birds of all types, squirrels she just loved, and her favorite were the little rabbits. She would run around the yard calling for her rabbit friends. She also really enjoyed this tree. And the reason I wrote about the tree is that this tree was so instrumental in her life. Erica really grew up beneath this magnificent Canadian cherry tree that grew in our front yard. It was very large. It's over 20 years old. And when Erica was just a tiny little baby, her grandpa would take her outside, put a little blanket down in the shade of the tree, and they would play there for a few hours in the morning each day, and then she'd come in for lunch and a nap. But it was an integral part of her life. We would also lift her up and her little body up so she could touch the leaves and touch the little twigs that grew out of the tree, and was really a tactile experience for her. As she grew, when she could toddle around and crawl, she would crawl over to the little brick wall that surrounded the tree trunk and stand up and pull herself up and pat the bricks and throw twigs at the tree and all sorts of things. So it was very important in her life. And sadly, just after her second birthday, Erica was struck suddenly by a mysterious illness that just shattered our world. She spent 73 days in a children's hospital. The doctors were baffled. They didn't know what was wrong with her or what kind of illness she had. It defied all the normal tests and things that usually strike children. That's not what it was. And no one knew. So we were all just helpless to watch this fun little energetic, smart little girl deteriorate with brain inflammation, which ultimately closed down all of her abilities physically and mentally. And after she passed, I was a few months later sitting underneath her tree with my drum. I just learned how to drum, was doing that. And I took a little journey to meet her tree. And I asked her tree's soul if I could have the honor of creating a memorial garden under the tree around its massive trunk. And I believe that the tree answered me, yes, it would be honored to do so. And I learned too that we don't need to be on Earth for very long to have a big impact on not only other people, but on other beings, sentient beings, such as the tree, such as her animals that she enjoyed in our yard. So that was an important healing and learning for me as well. And I do truly believe that that tree really enjoyed her life with it and interacting with it as well, and is as honored to be with Erica and be associated with Erica as we are to have the tree associated with us.
Florentine, you also had a very special relationship with a tree you call grandfather tree. Would you tell us a little bit about the message? Well, first, would you tell us a little bit about grandfather tree and the messages that you've received from him?
Yes. Well, I was invited by Grandfather Tree to connect, and Grandfather Tree used another messenger to do a remote energy session. Grandfather Tree lives somewhere in the Northwest Pacific. I don't even know where. I just put out the intention on a sacred time to connect with Grandfather Tree, and because, well, I had to. I didn't want to, but because to me, while talking with tree, it was a little bit okay. I do it with animals, and afterwards I've learned I can communicate with everything, but it was just a tree. And but well, I tried to be open to it, and I was open to it at no expectations, and I just went into that old honored fashion of breathe in, breathe out, and try to align. And then this grandfather tree is part of a circle of trees, and it's being guarded by a ponderosa tree. And at once, the ponderosa tree invited me to step forward, and she was giggling. She was actually giggling. So yeah, I was really amazed that trees have a sense of humor, that they really notice us. Because, like you all tell me, I look at trees, I watch them, but I never knew they were watching me or paying attention at me. So that was an eye opener too. And well, and she was just probing into my energy, and Ponderosa accepted me to enter the circle. And somehow Grandfather Tree called to me. And well, it's just a grandfatherly persona. So in a way, he really reminds me of my grandfather. It's just soothing and strong, and when he was alive. And then Grandfather Tree just invited me and to connect. And to me, it was really simple, just to align and late. And he opened up a whole magic kingdom for me. The fairies, they showed themselves, and since then, I'm really into the elementals too. And as well, he invited me to merge with his sense of being, with his being, and by doing so, I felt such a connection between all that is and deep into the earth. And I always knew that there is that interconnectedness, but I never really experienced it. So that moment, I did experience it. I still do, because I think I visit Grandfather Tree very regularly. He's one of my wisest mentors in my life nowadays. And as well, he showed me how to use the root systems and to use them for healing, to send healing. Like for now, with in Europe, we have that those problems going on, and just to use the root systems, and then into the crystalline grid of our Earth, and to allow the light to filter through, and just to spread. I don't need to do anything. I just need to show up and be, and it happens.
Mary, you have a beautiful story included in our book entitled Hearing Earth's Voice. And your story, you're actually an author that has shared hear about hearing Earth's voice in another book as well. Can you talk about this story and your hope, right? Like, you've put out this message in an even bigger way as well. And what's your hope for the humans that encounter your story?
Well, Anna Maria, my story begins when I am a corporate lawyer, doing the logical, analytical work that corporate lawyers do. So I had very ordinary life until one day I heard very clearly and very distinctly, unequivocally, take dictation from the earth. And I knew right away it was the angelic realm. There was no one else there. And the cadence and the power that came with those words were so profound. And I was at first just quiet and sinking into this message. And then I thought, I'm not some illustrious spiritual guru. What do I do with this? I had no idea. I puzzled over it for some time, but then I took a pen and paper, went outdoors, sat in the woods on the edge of our backyard, and just sat there. I had no idea. What does this mean? Take dictation from the earth. I just sat there. And then all of a sudden, the words started coming. And initially, it was hard for my pen, my hand, and my mind to keep up with it. And what this continued to unfold over the days and months and a couple years. And what became clear to me is that the earth was dictating to me a book, her book, which is now Earth Speaks Up, published by Sacred Stories. And the earth was also joined by the angelic realm, supported by a group of very wise beings that seemed to me to be like you would sense from some very wise group of professors, serious professors. And so alternately, the earth would bring through some wisdom to be shared with me, with all of us, supported by angelic beings who support the earth and also support humanity. And what came forth was a book that it shows us that the earth is not at all as we perceive her. And we ourselves are not at all as we perceive ourselves. We each individually have a great role to play in the health of well-being of our planet. And it's not for someone else, big government, big science, whatever. It's for us individually. And the earth and the angelic realm are very eager to show us the way. They feel it is important to show us the way to begin to work together with the earth, with trees, with all of nature. What everyone has said in our sessions today resonates with what the earth is bringing forth too. And so she's given us this book of guidance to show us how to begin to work on the energetic level to bring forth health and well-being for the planet and ourselves.
Jill Landry, your story that you share about a tree, it really showed how the trees bring healing to us, but your story also showed how we can bring that healing energy to the trees as well. Would you please share a little bit about your story?
I was first really drawn to this tree, when it was a tree in my own backyard and in a home that I was had just moved into, and I noticed that this tree looked different than all the other trees. It was the end of summer. The tree didn't have any leaves. All the other trees seemed to be flourishing, and that really struck me as, okay, this is interesting. And as I kind of spent more time there in this place, I just felt drawn to sit next to this tree, and I didn't really know why. It was just something that I was like, oh, this is where I'm gonna sit. And there weren't a lot of places to sit in the backyard. It was small, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna sit here. And over time, it kind of, as I sat there, I started to feel this connection happening. And then it was nothing that I planned to do, or it just was like, I felt really drawn to offering or practicing Reiki, as I was sitting there. And that was something I was learning to do at that time. And so I didn't really know why I was doing it, but I just noticed over time that, it's like the tree really, really wanted this. And we started to develop a connection, that led to me hearing, spoken words, and we would have conversations. And I really watched this tree, in the next season, really blossom. I mean, physically blossom, energetically blossom. And then in turn, I received healing from that tree at a later time when I was going through a really difficult experience. So for me, this felt really profound to share, because it was really about a deeper relationship that formed, and it wasn't just about one way communication, but it really became that we were just, although she was in tree form and I was in human form, we were just two, spiritual beings at our core, really coming together to kind of help each other.
Brooke, you shared a story that is very dramatic, and it feels very much like a story that, again, is that voice of nature telling its version of what's going on. Would you share a little bit about your story, Trinity and the Tornado, and how it impacted you, and how you're hoping it will impact others who experience that story as well?
With Okay, yeah, dramatic tornado. I know, I always have to be dramatic. But I think with the way global warming is going, we're all going to experience these extreme natural events, whether it's a fire or flooding, an earthquake. With me, it just happened to be a tornado. And it's very easy to cast yourself as a victim, to say, oh, poor me? Why did this happen? But I think one of the things that really came from this for me was that the tornado wasn't personal. It wasn't coming to get me, nor my neighborhood, nor any other place where these things happen. But it's nature. And we can find openings within these so-called disasters. There are places where we can learn things from what has happened. I mean, certainly about humankind's treatment of nature. But for me, it was really the connection with both the trees that were lost, huge amounts of tree lost around my home and the whole area. But then the trees that survived actually spoke to me. So afterwards, I did a lot of walking and mourning, like for the trees that were lost. But I also found a tree that survived. And I was able to align myself with that tree, and she replayed the tornado for me as though it was in real time. And what she showed me was that the trees in my yard that surrounded my property took the hit, so that my property did not get destroyed the way everybody else around me had their homes just obliterated. And so one of the reasons I wrote the story about it is that I truly believe that we all have these connections if we allow ourselves.
Dan, you take us on a powerful journey in your story, Tree Spirits Among Us. Would you share that a little bit about your story and how it really impacted you?
So my story is I grew up, I had some trauma in childhood. And when you have trauma in childhood, you sort of lose that sense of wonder, but you adapt for it with a sense of imagination and fantasy so that you're not dealing with what you have to look at. And vision has always been one of my things. It's like my tagline is, I was born blind in my right eye, but I see magic in my left. And that's true. I've always squinted a little bit with my right eye, and people sort of made fun of it and whatever. And what I've done is sort of taken this wound twofold and turned it into some sort of healing force. And I remember going out on my first vision quest, and the leader said, you know, you go spend a night out in the middle of the woods, and you take a sleeping bag, and it's just you in the woods. And I saw a tree, and I put myself up against the tree, and I slept literally on the tree. And I came back the next morning. I was so excited to hear other people's story about sleeping on trees. And he said to me, he goes, I hate to disappoint you, but I'm gonna bet you're the only one that slept on a tree. And he was right. I was the only one that slept on a tree. But that opened this world to seeing what I call mud men and faces and shadow spirits and water spirits.
I just, again, want to thank you all, because we all have a million reasons not to share the story, right? Like, oh, when am I going to have time to write that? Or, oh, is it good enough? Or, well, that was my personal experience. What is anyone else going to get from it? A million reasons not to do it, but you did.